Thanks, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Today's EviWig, we will be having a presentation from EPRI, and then Zach, can you switch to the agenda? Thanks. For today's agenda, we have a presentation by EPRI, and after that, we will go through the straw proposals modifications that have happened so far, and then the next steps. And we have scheduled our next meeting for December 11th, and after that, it's going to be determined. We'll see what happens after the December 11th meeting. But for now, let's get going to Catherine from EPRI. Thanks, Catherine.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Yeah, and we're excited to be here. Thanks to the Lisa and team for inviting us. So you probably have all heard about EPRI, and let me just pause for a second. My name is Catherine Stankin, and maybe I'll turn to Watson. You could introduce yourself as well, but we're both on the EVs to Scale 2030 team at EPRI. So Watson, go ahead, and then I'll jump back in for the rest of the intro.
Yeah, hi, Watson Collins, Senior Technical Executive with EPRI. Nice to meet y'all.
And I'm Jen Robinson with EPRI, the project manager for the Grid Fast project that we're going to hear about today. Nice to meet you.
Great. Well, let's turn to the next slide. And before we dive into some of the tools that we have, you're probably all familiar with EPRI, or the Electric Power Research Institute, but what you might not know is this initiative called EVs to Scale 2030. And so what we, based on some work with utilities and the industry and fleets, we know that everyone is aligning towards these really aggressive 2030 vehicle electrification goals. And so this initiative is a 3-year initiative and developed from the very, that second bullet point there, that what is the pace of needed year-over-year action and investment needed to prepare charging sites in the grid? That wasn't clear. And so we've developed a number of tools to help with that. And ultimately, to be ready for EV load at scale, we need in the blue text there, the proactive outreach and planning, policies and processes that prepare for EV loads, and prioritized and prudent investments in grid build. And so what you're going to hear today is 3 tools from EPRI that will help to achieve all 3 of those blue texted items there. It's a very collaborative effort. So let's move on to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it to Watson, who's going to describe each of these kind of at a high level, and then he's going to flip it back to me one more time, and then and then we'll dive into each one of these individually. So Watson, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so we put together a portfolio of projects to address the streamlining the EV service connection process. And the reason why we broke it down into 3 segments, so to speak, is so we can kind of create focus on the unique problems for each of those segments. That, and in the small, with the small customers, the set of problems that they have is quite different than the set of problems that are very large projects that require, possibly even substation upgrades, or at least distribution line extensions, where there's the challenge of the grid planning side of things. So the challenges on the large side, we have a project called Grid Fast, which addresses those challenges for the big projects. So it's to get this early and standardized information sharing between fleets and utilities. And that's for that, again, before the service request process actually happens. So that's the one of the key challenges for the big projects. On the other end of the project, on the smaller side, we've noticed that, in our work and research of interviewing and surveys and things we've done, we've identified on the smaller side, there's a lot more, the challenges are with novice EV customers understanding the process and how to navigate the process. So there's that, there's a different set of challenges. And then in the middle set is we have a project called Grid Fast Express that's funded by the DOE, and that's providing technical assistance to utilities with projects that are size of NEVI, which are kind of repeatable projects that are scalable across the country, and it's just making sure that everyone's on the same page, and so that's why we've separated these The Scissor and GridFast Express are funded by the DOE, and the GridFast Express is funded by the EVs to Scale initiative. Thanks, Catherine.
Great, let's go to the next slide. So if that was the breakdown on projects, then sort of a little bit by size, this slide is complicated. It's breaking down the projects compared to where they relate with the customer energization journey. And so each of those boxes is one step in that journey. So the customer would start at the left, potentially in this informational stage or at a customer intake stage, and then ultimately move through the process to where they're initiating a service request. And then the process would pick up again with the green colored boxes, which is generally a standard utility process in dealing with new service requests. And then at the right hand side of the screen, we've got final construction and then some ongoing customer engagement topics there, rates, programs, and billings, et cetera. So the GridFast Express, you'll see when we get into the further details about it, it'll really touch upon areas relating to kind of project refinement, even before we get into the service request area. And then also, once the service request has been submitted, the application review and also the design phase. Our second big project here, GridFast, that's going to touch on everything from the blue boxes. So everything from where the customer intake step here through the utility matchmaking phase, project refinement, all the way up to, you'll hear a little bit about a common app and the formal service request there. The Scissor process project, that'll deal with a lot of the things in this informational stage, which is in the pink box, which might be some things like fleet assessment programs or fleet advisory programs, other educational steps surrounding the process, et cetera. And then there'll also be solutions that Jen maybe mentions once we get through the typical utility process there with the service request and then straight on through to construction. So at a whole, this is another way that you can view these projects. And at the end, then we'll tie it back with the joint utilities straw proposal. So with that, I will then turn it to the next slide. I think we have the Scissor project up first, which Jen's going to jump in and tell you about.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so as Watson teed us up, we determined early on that we wanted to focus with this project on those smaller fleet customers, those smaller fleet as well as multifamily customers. And so we decided that for a number of reasons, you know, as Watson talked to, different challenges for those folks in some ways. In some cases, transportation electrification represents a whole new relationship with their utilities. Often the smaller folks may have limited resources, and often, you know, much of the conversation today in the industry is around grid connection related to challenges associated with medium and large customers. So we felt that there was really a space there to start thinking about and supporting or understanding what smaller customers could use as well. Their challenges are less potentially about capacity availability and more about just supporting the volume, the sheer number of these types of customers, and the variability, the variation of these types of customers. So really, in a nutshell, what this work is centers on 3 core deliverables. The first is a roadmap around EV service connection procedures with a focus on these smaller fleet customers or multifamily customers. What might an idealized process look like for those types of customers? And we have done a series of interviews with those customers as well as utilities to understand their processes as well in relation to these smaller customers and in general. And right now, actually, we have a draft roadmap out for review. And maybe Catherine can, or we'll, throughout the webcast, we can maybe, you know, talk a little bit about it. If you would like to comment and see some of the summary research as well as this roadmap that we've created, we're trying to get it out to as many folks as possible for review. So that's one core piece of the work. A second core piece of the work is a support resource for smaller customers. And we've decided to focus in on smaller fleets in particular. There is quite a bit of information out there. It's certainly a growing amount of information for maybe multifamily housing customers that are starting to think about electrifying or putting in charging infrastructure for their tenants. So we decided to focus on smaller fleets because there's probably less information out there. We're in the process now of determining what will this support resource look like. We're going to do some continued research with smaller fleet customers, and we want to focus those on, you know, especially those operating in disadvantaged communities, to understand what would be a beneficial support resource for you. Originally, we were envisioning a website, but we want to kind of hear from the customers to understand what might be appropriate there. And then the third piece of this work is adapting our tool GridFast, which is, as Watson teed up, it was really intended, it's for everyone, but it was really intended to help solve some of the problems that larger fleet and public charging customers may have. Third part of this particular scissor work is how might we adapt that tool so it's appropriate for smaller customers as well. And then if you go to the next slide, this is kind of a sneak peek of, well, it's really the process kind of laid out, the energization journey for a customer. Certainly not their whole electrification journey, but just that phase of getting their charging infrastructure energized. And one of the key things that we're adding is that sort of additional informational phase that is so important. In our draft roadmap, we've kind of laid out all the challenges we heard both from utilities and customers for each of these steps, and then have developed a number of potential solutions for those challenges. And that's where we would really love some additional input on that. But please let us know if you'd be interested in seeing that. We'd love to get input on that. And I think that's it for the scissor stuff. If you want to move to the next slide, and then the next slide again, actually. Next, we're going to hand it over, I believe, to Watson to talk a little bit about GridFast Express. Or should we pause here for if there's any comments or questions at this point?
I'm not seeing any hands, Jen, so I think we can continue.
Great, thank you. Watson?
Great. And so the next project we're going to talk about, going back to those original 3 circles, was the middle one, GridFast Express. We just signed contracts with the DOE this project about a month ago, so we're just getting this project stood up at this point. What it's focused on is this question of like, how can we make these NEVI-sized projects go through the pipeline quicker? And one of the things that we noticed in a lot of the work that's been done by others out there and reports written and stuff is there was talk about the process of getting vetted information to the utilities and that dialogue that happens between these projects and the utilities and so what we're going to do in this is a key deliverable in this GridFast. The first big part of it is providing technical assistance to frontline utility staff through a vetted catalog of system topologies. So what you can think of this as is we're going to reach out to, we're going to have Black and Veatch and Burns and Mac as part of our project team, work with all the major charging infrastructure providers and the NEVI awardees and such, and collect a catalog of these system topologies. And we're going to assemble those into a catalog that's available, and then we're going to run technical assistance to the frontline utility staff, because we're going to provide these resources to the utility folks that work in offices where they wear steel-toed shoes and hard hats in their jobs, and they don't attend EV meetings and understand and aren't on top of the latest developments on charging infrastructure hardware and what the current state of the technology is. And so what this catalog will provide them is this information that says, oh yeah, this Tesla design of 24 ports and 6 power cabinets, it's been used all over the country, and here's the transformer sizes that have been used there. So it's going to provide that information and validated information for it. Think of it like we also have a vetted product list. This is kind of like a vetted systems list in some sense, where we'll have some validation that of what this information is from engineering firms. Second big part of this is infrastructure learning labs. So then what we're going to do also for these projects is we're going to go through and do a fleet advisory services for 30 or 25 sites across the country that represent a portfolio of different types of projects. And we're also going to complete a 30% design, which means some preliminary early phase electrical drawings and one-line diagrams. So what it enables these customers to do is to move forward with the engineering firm and understand the budget and the interconnection process with the utility with this 30% design. So it jumpstarts these projects. So what we're also going to do and follow up with that then is identify what are the lessons learned, the decisions made by these EV customers, and publish those as the lessons learned. So it's essentially you can think of like we're going to try and do a transit bus project, a school bus project. We're going to have other representative candidate projects in this thing and repeat them. So I'll pause there for questions. Right.
I'm not seeing any hands or anything in the
Okay.
chat right now. Thank you.
Great. And I'll probably tag team with Jen on the grid fast. So I'll kick it off, Jen, since yeah.
Yeah, actually, and one quick thing too, your slide with all your partners made me realize I forgot to mention that on our scissor project too. As Catherine mentioned, it's definitely a group effort. We're working with ATE, IREC, RMI, and various Clean Cities coalitions, including Louisiana Clean Fuels and Metro Energy Center out of Kansas City. So wanted to get that in. Over to you on a grid fast, Watson.
Oh, sure. Great. So one thing we noticed is when we address the problem with the bigger projects is that the service request, that the form that the customer or electrician fills out on behalf of the customer, that's typically the point that kicks off the clock for initiating a service, and the challenge there is if a customer got to that point and it was a very large project that was going to involve large line extensions or substation upgrades or things like that that take years to complete. If the customer already got to the point where they can fill out everything in a service request, that means they've already fully designed the project. They have permits in place. They're ready to actually start moving into construction. That there's kind of like a mismatch going on there because the utility then doesn't have enough time to complete those line extensions because this project has a construction time frame. Once it gets to that stage, that's shorter than a typical building construction, because buildings typically take, big buildings that are in the megawatt power level take, years to complete. A charging station that's in megawatts and power level, once you get these fully engineered, you're talking about a much shorter time frame than a building. So to address that challenge, you have to start earlier and engage this dialogue, and that's what this grid fast is stood up to do, is to capture information earlier in the process before you have a fully engineered site, and integrate that into the distribution planning cycle better inside the utilities, and provide utilities with information so that they can evaluate those projects in their planning process and address those upgrade needs based on their assessment of the probability of projects moving forward. So that's what this is trying to do is to start the dialogue early. And the other key thing we're trying to do with GridFast is the thing we hear from fleets across the country and larger EV customers is that they're saying, like, we need a way to talk with utilities with the single voice. Because it's really hard for us. There's over 3,200 utilities across the country. It's really hard for us to figure out, which is the right utility to be talking to for every single project we have. Think of Amazon with all their locations, or even these Tesla supercharger locations. Hundreds of them across the country. So that's what the fleet EV customers have been asking for, and is to get this process earlier. So on the next slide, what we've also learned by talking with utilities and fleet EV customers, there's about 15 pain points that we've heard from and work identified by these interviews and working with industry folks on this, from the stage of the vision strategy into the planning and forecasting, design, engineering, and approval and procurement. I wasn't going to read through all of these. We have a report that's linked on the bottom here of what all these pain points were, but we did identify a whole bunch of pain points. The GridFast tool is to try and in a tool itself address a lot of these pain points. It doesn't address all of them, but do it in an integrated fashion. So we're not trying to address each one of these problems individually, not understand that there's a system of things together. And so we're trying to address GridFast as a systems approach to addressing a lot of these challenges in a comprehensive way, as opposed to just picking apart each one of those things and developing one-of solutions for each of those. And I'll move on to the next slide. I might turn it over to Jen here. Do you want me to turn it over to you, Jen, here, or
Yeah, sure, I can take this one. So what is, this work that we did culminated in this tool GridFast that we built. And essentially it's that information exchange platform to help EV customers engage early and efficiently with utilities across the US to help accelerate infrastructure energization. So, as Watson mentioned, for EV customers, it matches them with utilities across the US, not just the utility, but the actual point of contact at the utility. It allows them to access curated information from utilities, and by extension, it allows utilities to very easily and efficiently provide curated information in a very quick way to help with workflow, support workflow on the utility side as well. Access to information on hosting capacity maps were available for customers, and that single source of utility information in a standardized way for customers. And then on the utility side, the big pain point we heard, of course, is vast overestimates of load in many cases. Some cases it's from consultants of customers, some cases it's because customers are new and they're not sure. So the tool itself helps the customer right size what the likely load of their potential project may be. Obviously for utilities, it could help with lead generation for fleet advisory services and other programs that a utility already has stood up to help identify early potential customers looking for EV charging infrastructure. Project-specific information from customers for grid planning activities. It is important, obviously, that your planners, your forecasters get access to customer information, even if it's early plans, to understand what might be coming down the pike. And the ability to integrate and complement internal utility systems. Obviously, utilities already have their own systems set up. In many cases, there's been a lot of effort put into setting up those systems, so we want to make sure that this complements the systems. And do we have any questions? I think there's a couple coming through the chat. Is now a good time to pause and look at those? We got a question. Are these programs intended to assist V1G or V2G or both? Yeah, good questions. I'd say the first one we talked about scissor, we explicitly made the point to say at this point we're just talking about one-way service connections, not necessarily two-way interconnections. Watson, do you want to talk about GridFast Express really quickly? Does that accomplish both V1G and V2G?
Yeah, when we do those site assessments, the fleet advisory services, if there's opportunities there for a flexible interconnection or other things like that as part of those projects, we will identify those. We're not going to exclude them, but yeah, I think there's an opportunity there, as far as our criteria for picking those 25 sites to make sure that we include, a representative projects that represent the spectrum of things in that middle size category of projects.
Good question. And then back to GridFast, it can be both. It's again, we're asking for sort of early information, including we asked for information about, are you intending NEDRs, solar, battery storage, et cetera. So again, just trying to capture that early information. Okay, if you move to the next slide. Oh, yes. And so, in a nutshell, the whole point is to really help unlock the value of communicating early. Utilities often say that to customers, right? Contact us early and often, but sometimes that's hard for customers to do because they don't necessarily know who to contact and with what information to bring. So this is intended to help with that, which of course can lead to all these benefits that are listed here. The ability to have that early conversation to help with siting decisions. We've heard several stories of situations where, had they talked earlier, that customer could have actually sited somewhere else, which would have been much more beneficial for both. So, lots of potential benefits to be had by engaging these early conversations.
Yeah, and Jen, I was just going to add on that.
Yeah, for sure.
That one of the things we've heard is that utilities from this is a quote from a utility that we say for the fleet EV customers to reach out to utilities early, and there's been this is a quote from a utility. There's been mixed results of the success of that. And what we're trying to do with GridFast is bring a way so that this information is actually in a system. It's not in just somebody's email inbox, and hope that early dialogue between the EV customer and a fleet resides in an email inbox. Is trying to put it in a system that everyone inside the utilities has access to this information so that they can query it and understand, what the status is of a lot of projects that are in the pipeline before a service request.
Great. Next slide. Oh, we got a hand up. Jackie, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. Is there any guidance on call it like triggering conditions or triggering amounts of information a customer should have that says, okay, now you can go to your utility? Because a lot of customers and utilities we talked to have said that when customers are starting to plan but maybe haven't got a grant yet, for example, they'll go to the utility and it's too early. There's a lot of times when it's just too early, and then it leads to confusion about, well, when is the sweet spot to actually start engaging?
Yeah, so that's what it's never too early to put information into GridFast. That's what we're trying to say. It's never too early because we're trying to get that information identified early. And what we do is when we right size the request, we're not asking people to identify the chargers and the power levels of the chargers and all that other stuff. We're asking them, what kind of vehicles you have, how many of them do you have, and how far do you drive? And then we kind of behind the scenes, GridFast kind of says, provides an order of magnitude and helps size that so that the customer has a good frame of reference to start thinking through what the next steps are, and having a more productive dialogue with the utility over what their project is. Well, we also ask a lot of questions during that intake into GridFast to assess how mature is this project, because if the project is really mature, we help the utility identify, oh, this is a really mature project. Or if it's a customer that needs a lot of, essentially a fleet advisory services or information, it's you can kind of get a sense based on the responses out of the questions. Utilities are better able to assess themselves, when is this project ready to move forward and move into more stages that involve more complexity inside the utility side.
So it's more about like a level of population of the form. The utility starts to say, okay, now we can engage. So that's sort of more what it is.
Yeah, and so that's kind of why it's different than a service request. Service request means you met a milestone and you're ready to kick off a process. This is trying to say, okay, talk to us early. What's the, utilities are saying, talk to us early. This is the mechanism to start engaging that dialogue and capturing that information and providing a way for utilities to actually scale. There's going to be increasing numbers of these kind of requests, and the utilities are going to have to be able to address the increasing scale of these requests. And this tool is really set up also to help them address those scaling issues that are expected to come as the volume of these requests increases, because there's only so many people that can manually perform quote capacity checks inside the utility, and so if we can start figuring out ways to improve automation of a lot of those kind of things, that's the direction we're going with this kind of tool.
Looks like there's another couple of questions in the chat from Charlie Elcock. Many of the site developers using ICA maps are noting the data in these maps is not quote unquote investment grade that can be relied upon to make business investment decisions at particular locations. What are the plans to improve that info quality?
I can take that.
I can speak at least. It's a big question, and Catherine will speak to some of the stuff that we're doing. I can say specifically about GridFast, our focus here, one of the things that's nice is it is an information exchange, a secure information exchange. So even in a situation where a utility doesn't have a public hosting capacity map, or maybe they do, but they have some more detailed information that they don't want to make public, GridFast can be used expressly for that purpose as well. But Catherine, do you want to speak to that in the broader sense as well?
Yeah, that's a big initiative at EPRI at the moment, looking at the hosting capacity maps. And one of the other big tools that EPRI has under EVs to Scale 2030 is the e-roadmap, which shows where and when EV load is coming out to 2030, and then also at a full electrification scale. And so we're working with a number of utilities right now to get access to their hosting capacity maps, but also then really to standardize that across the board, for that very purpose that customers are needing a little bit more of the similar information when they're looking at sites in one spot versus the next, et cetera. So our colleagues in the distribution department at EPRI are working on that, and they've got a number of pieces of information that are about to come out, and we're working behind the scenes with utilities on that. So Charlie, I can follow up with you on that, because I know you're working on that. There's some of the industry members you're partnering with.
And it looks like Zach has a hand raised as well.
Yes, Zach Wigan with BGIC. I apologize. I just joined, so this question may have been discussed already. But is there any option in this tool for customers for fleets to come and say, hey, I have, these 4 sites I'm considering. Can you input, would that be 4 separate sort of inputs? Or can you say, hey, I have the one fleet, I just have 4 sites that I'm considering. Can I use this tool to tell the utility that I'm considering 4 sites, and then they can help me choose out of the 4 sort of pre-selected sites, for example?
Yeah, definitely. So if it's you're saying there's kind of 1 of 4 potential locations for the same project, not all 4 would likely go ahead. They need help with the choosing the site. Yeah, for sure. The tool has that ability as well. So if a customer isn't even yet sure on the exact location, they have the ability to choose multiple locations. And usually that would match to the same utility, but sometimes it could be on a borderline, in which case it would even match to the individual utilities associated with those different sites. That's in a situation where it's kind of one project, but they're still not entirely sure which individual site. So that's a great opportunity for those early discussions about, what might be most appropriate, or at least on the grid side in terms of capacity. And then there's other options too. So in a situation where a customer is planning multiple projects across the US or in a service territory as well, the tool makes it easy for them to sort of put in a project and they can replicate it if the same thing is going in different locations as well. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for customers to share information quickly with utilities.
And Jen, we should also mention when the scenario where there's 4 potential sites, when you pick the sites inside the GridFast tool, that you can toggle between just a Google Maps version, and then there'll also be a map that shows the ICA layers on it too, and out of our e-roadmap data. So you'll be able to, once you identify a site, you'll be able to toggle between those 2 different views, just to see those locations. And if the utility has a publicly available ICA map, that we're reading into e-roadmap, it'll be available when they're picking those sites.
And in situations where maybe the customer has some choice in their site, we also have, part of the tool includes different resources that a utility can make available just in general to any customer on GridFast, or a curated set of set of resources once, so you sort of know a little bit about the project. The utility has the option of including things like, if they're in that situation where maybe there are areas where there's plenty of capacity and they're encouraging electrification projects, you have the ability to sort of speak to that in the tool. So for example, if you have real estate maps or others that talk about capacity and where there could be areas where you're encouraging development, you'll be able to link all of that information in a utility specific resources that anybody would be able to see on GridFast. We're getting into the weeds now, but that's a great question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. May I ask just a follow-up question? It's actually kind of not as related to that, but just also on the tool. Is there opportunity for customers to input information regarding willingness to seek a flexible service connection, or enabling technology that they intend to use or maybe considering, that can support a flexible service connection or load management tools, for example, or other sort of on-site software or hardware? Is that built into the input information?
Yeah, we do ask questions about those exact things. Would you be willing to, to talk about interim solutions in a situation where, or tell us about, are you planning to have other types of enabling technology associated with that as well? So yeah, we do ask questions around that.
So there's 2 types of flexibility there, Zach. One is just like, do you need the full power requirements, at the initial in-service date, or so there's that kind of flexibility. And then the second kind of flexibility is around, once it's fully operational, is your load flexible so that so that you can reduce power during peak demand periods or things like that. And so those are the two dimensions that we're asking questions about.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, because I mean, that's exactly how we've been defining it, at least within our group. And I know that this topic keeps coming up in this working group time and time again, in the EV IIWG. And I'm not sure we've ever defined it. So I think that's a really helpful way to define it. Is there are two types, and there's the interim approach, and then there's long-term. What is your flexibility based on the enabling equipment or technologies you have? So I really appreciate that. And I think that for this EVWIG broadly, beyond just the GridFast tool, but just in general, we ought to adopt that and work that into the proposal and any subsequent work from this EVWIG.
I think that's it for raised hands. Yeah.
And I know we're running up against our time, so maybe Lisa or Zach, if we can, okay, we can go till another 18 minutes or so. All right, thanks. Keep going, Jen.
Okay. Yeah, so how does GridFast work? So essentially, it all kind of starts with a project, and the customer would input what we call an EV project. And there's 5 stages for a customer. The first stage is when they're actually putting in the details of their project, and they can use the tool even as an internal tool before they share it with any utility, to understand what potential load might be, play around with it, use it for internal discussions, etc. When they have their project details entered and they're ready to be matched with the utility, we give them a few checks to make sure, are you sure you want to share this? And we show them exactly what information will be shared with the utility. But then they basically are matched automatically with the distribution utility associated with the location or locations in a situation where maybe they're not quite sure that they've identified. And at that point, the utility then is part of the platform as well. The utility's view includes those 4 boxes on the rightmost side, whereas the customer gets all 5 boxes. So the utility would then confirm that, yep, this is indeed in my service territory, or nope, that's actually not in my service territory, as well as, basically review some early information that they're seeing from the customer. In the capacity information exchange stage of a project, essentially it's a way for customers and the utility to converse and talk as they normally would in sort of the early stages. But the tool, as I mentioned before, provides the utility a really quick and easy way to share out information. So there's the welcome package, which is the general information that's public information that you would normally share anyway, but now it's in a sort of standardized way and it's in one spot for the customer to see, as well as what we call curated information. So that's a project package, and that's information that might be relevant and specific to the site that they're considering, whether it's a type of program they may be eligible for, a tariff, etc. So there's a way for the utilities to really quickly choose from a pick list of items that they will have already uploaded into the tool to say, it looks like these 3 things are probably relevant for the customer at this stage. And the conversation continues. If there are specific studies that a utility may need to do to get to an answer on whether there's potential capacity available, the utility can lay that out as well. So it's clear for both parties what exactly needs to be done. And as things are accomplished, you can check them off the checklist. So once the utility is done with sort of providing that customer some preliminary information, the customer, of course, moves to the next stage. They need to finalize, is this real? Are they ready to submit a service request? The work that needs to happen in order to do that. And once they believe that they're ready to submit a service request, they would go ahead and do that through the last stage. And right now, the tool basically just allows them and basically provides messaging to say, it's now time to submit a service request. But as Catherine mentioned earlier, we're working on something calling the EV Common App, which is a way to basically enable, we're working with a subcommittee of a few different utilities to understand, is there a world where we could have a common service request and there'd be an API associated with that which would then link into the utility's existing service request processes. So lots of work underway there, and every utility is going to be in a different stage regarding, you know, how they adopt some of these tools. And it's our job to make sure that it's flexible for everyone, depending on where they are with their systems, and how to integrate this tool. We want these tools to complement existing systems, not compete with them in any way. So yeah, that's a little bit about how the platform works at a high level. Watson, anything that you want to pile on there? If not, we will move to the next stage, to the next slide. So where are we now with our rollout? So as Catherine mentioned, we have an initiative called EVs to Scale. We've got 20 utilities that are a part of that. And it's only those utilities that have access now. We're calling it the member early access phase. It's a live environment, so it's not a test environment. We're encouraging our utilities to get set up on the tool, and we're in that onboarding phase now with our utility members. In Q1 2025, we are wanting to open it up. We are going to work with our EVs to Scale members to understand who are the customers that we should engage with first, so that you know, we start with, you know, a strong customer pull based on the utilities that are already set up on the system. And then throughout 2025, we will continue to expand access to other utilities and other customers as well. And we envision it's almost kind of like a seesaw effect. You know, as new customers come on, they may match with utilities, you know, across the country, in which case that will bring other utilities on, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we are with the process, but it's live, and we're in the process now of onboarding our existing members. And I think that's it for
Jen, there's one question from Jackie in the chat. Would the platform help the customer assess if they need the full nameplate connection or have potential to accept a flexible connection? Or Watson, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a great question. You know, because actually the original impetus or the original inspiration for this work was around a project that I had some visibility into, where it was a fleet application, and they multiplied the nameplate times the number of buses they had, and they came up with a 12 megawatt site, and the utility upgrades were $27 million, and the project didn't move forward. And so in a fleet situation where the infrastructure is really driven by the needs of the vehicles, our calculators are based on that simple thing I described earlier of just how many vehicles and what type of vehicles they are, which drives those infrastructure requirements. We understand that in other situations, you know, in public charging infrastructure and travel plazas and things like that, where it's not a fleet thing, it's you do have to understand the nameplate of the infrastructure. But the utilities typically they apply a thing called a diversity factor to the sum of the nameplate of all the equipment. And in that situation, we have a grid fast calculated version of that diversity factor, but we also understand the utilities may have their own versions of those diversity factors between what's the sum of the nameplate ratings versus how they size a transformer to serve that infrastructure. So again, two tracks differently, fleets done with the number of vehicles, and then for travel plazas, it's more based on that nameplate rating thing with a diversity factor.
Okay, we can go to our second to last slide then. So just as a quick then, and the next slide, just to bring it all together here, just so that you were just seeing a little bit of the relationship between our three tools and then what the joint utilities had proposed there. So we showed this at the beginning, just that entire customer energization journey a little bit and where our tools are. And then just a quick note at the bottom there, the straw proposal has aspects including the pre-application customer engagement. So what we would consider something in that informational stage, and fleet assessments, things along the customer intake phase, and then the operational measures, which would be more of the green boxes on our slide. So all complementary to all of our tools, pretty complementary to everything that the straw proposal was saying. So with that, I think we're at the end of the presentation then. And so if there's no more questions, or if anyone has questions, I'll put our emails in the chat. So feel free to reach out to any of us. If anyone has a final question now.
Could you just go back to that slide for 1 second?
Do you want me to talk about it one more time, or just showing that the GridFast Express, those templates that Watson was talking about, that vetted system topology that would help out at stages before you input in the service request, and then also a little bit after, depending on when the customer's coming to the utility. GridFast is a number of series of steps before you even put in the service request, and then also like once the customer comes with that request, it kind of goes into a more formal standard utility process. Scissor is for small fleets and multifamily housing, and that's a lot of different solutions in this kind of pre-phase that we're just calling informational stage at the moment. But there's also a couple solutions there that we've been identifying that are within the normal utility process, so in some of those green boxes.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, EPRI team. I want to sincerely thank you for your presentation. It was very informative and very, very helpful. I think, did you have your contact information in this slide? These will be posted on the EVIWIG site as well as our document management. So if others have more questions,
emails in the chat.
Great. Back to the agenda. I believe it's going to be Katie Zellner and Grace Kilpatrick from Con Ed are next. And Grace, will you be presenting your presentation, or do you need us to?
They put a message in the Grace put a message in the chat saying they're having some audio issues, but they will share.
Yeah, I figured they did. Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Yes, I heard that.
Can you hear us, and can you start to see the screen here?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Both. Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, as Lisa mentioned, we wanted to share an overview of the modifications that the JU made to Con Edison's straw proposal on queue management to take it from document originally from the Con Edison perspective to the one that reflects that of the JU. We thought that it would be helpful first to provide a bit of a refresher on the timeline and what's led us to this point. So the midpoint order back in November was where Con Edison originally received the directive to submit the straw proposal. And that was a request that originated from Con Edison experiencing a high volume of applications towards the end of 2021. Con Edison submitted that straw proposal back in March of this year and presented upon it during the first EVWIG meeting. This really kicked off a period of comments from stakeholders over the early part of the summer, and towards July through September, the JU was really in the modification process and making changes to, again, take this from a cognizant document to one supported by the JU, but to also incorporate stakeholder feedback and comments. So that brings us here to today, where we'll be going through some of the types of changes that were made. And we also wanted to flag that in the coming months, the modified proposal will be filed with a comment period. So this has been this iterative process to date, but there will be another opportunity for comments from external stakeholders. Great. So moving on to really the bulk of the discussion for today. So, as I mentioned before, we started with this document that was originally reflecting just Con Edison's perspective. So that's on the left-hand side here. And what we'll talk about for the bulk of this slide is, how did the JU approach modifying this document so that it would become one supported by the entire JU. So in the middle, you can see that that modification process had us, consider what differences would need to be incorporated or thought about in that modification process. So we've highlighted some of those factors here, and I'll review them briefly, but this is not necessarily an exhaustive list. We had to consider application volume and how that might vary by utility and how that would then impact ability to implement queue management measures. We also had to think about engineering standards and making sure that the language in the modified proposal appropriately encompassed the engineering standards of each utility. We also had to consider staffing resources and whether how those vary and how those would then impact the ability to implement certain measures. And then there were other service territory specific characteristics that we also had to consider. So moving through that essential JU filter that created, we moved to the right-hand side of the slide where we had two main types of changes that were made in the modified proposal. The first being structural and the second being content. And we thought that it would be helpful to take a couple minutes here to walk through two specific examples, one for each type of change being made to help really illustrate the modification process. So first, on the structural side, in the original straw proposal, the first section is about operational measures around queue management. And this carried over to the modified proposal, but we've now split that first section into three subsections. So first, we have general application management measures that are broadly adopted by the JU and really reflect the steady state of the Make Ready program. Next, we have high volume application management measures, and these have been identified by the JU to be utilized if a utility finds themselves in a high volume application period. So this would really depend upon whether they're in a high volume application period. Really depends upon some of these factors in the middle, like obviously application volume, but also things like staffing resources. And there's more detail in the modified proposal about how a utility would go about defining a high volume application period. And then third, we added in a subsection for innovations. And this subsection highlights some measures that have been adopted by certain members of the JU, but not all, again, because of some of these differences in the middle. But we thought that these measures were important to highlight for their efforts around streamlining queue management. And then moving down on the slide to talk through content and to provide an example of that, we in the original proposal that Con Edison provided, we described an internal forecasting measure that our program team goes through. So essentially at Con Edison, a customer would first, for the Make Ready program, would first go through the incentive eligibility review process. And the program team would complete that process and essentially have information about the projects and the applications that they're receiving for the Make Ready program. The program team then develops an internal forecast to share with the service determination team. So the customer we go through the incentive eligibility review and then the service determination review. So the program team can provide a forecast of near-term expected work to that service determination team. As we learned through earlier in another EV-WIG meeting, as Josh Kaplan pointed out in his presentation about the upstate processes, the upstate utilities essentially parallel path that incentive eligibility review process and the service determination review process. So a customer is really starting both those processes at the same time, and the program teams do not have any advanced information that they can provide to the service determination teams. So because of that, and because this would only be applicable to the downstate utilities, we decided to remove this measure entirely from the modified proposal. I'll pause here to see if there are any specific questions, but this really is the big picture on how do we modify this to consider the rest of the JU and not just Con Edison's perspective. I was seeing, yeah. So I saw Zach Lugan's comment, will the updated proposal be circulated to the working group? So Lisa, I feel free to jump in here. Our understanding would be that the final version of the modified proposal would eventually be filed with a comment period. But Lisa, if you have any additional thoughts.
Staff is going to be editing the proposal, and hopefully by next meeting we can go over some of the changes and additions that have been made to it. And I think that we can put it up on the EviWig site, but it won't be filed in DMM yet. So Stephanie, we don't have a problem with posting it on, I think we did already previously, but we can post it up on the EviWig site for people to review, to look at and review and provide comments. Just they won't be public comments because the EviWig is not our document management.
Great, and I'm seeing another, thank you, Katie. I was seeing another comment about slides. Yes, they'll be shared afterwards on the EviWig DPS site. Great.
Can I just to remind everybody, all the presentations and these meetings recordings are always posted onto our EviWig site and to our DMM site. So if you're looking for past ones too, not only will these ones be dropped into the chat, but they're also on the EviWig site and on DMM.
Great. I'm going to switch to the final slide that we have here today, and then we'll also spend a couple minutes revisiting the Make Ready program flowcharts. But you know, we just talked about the modifications that were made to think about the utility by utility differences, or you know, really make this a JU supported document. But in this modification process, we also incorporated stakeholder feedback and took opportunities to provide clarity to Make Ready program participants. So this table that's on this slide is not exhaustive, but we thought that these were particularly good examples to share in this forum. So I'll go through each one briefly, but again, feel free to stop with any questions. So first, in the original SHA proposal, the topic was queue management for EV charging station projects more broadly. We have now narrowed that scope to focus on V1G EV charging station projects in the modified proposal. And this really aligns the scope of the modified proposal with that of the EV-WIG forum. Next, we just spoke about that innovation subsection that we added to the modified proposal. And within this, we've included language about supporting participants who are looking to implement load management technology and or phased deployment of V1G chargers. And this was really added in response to clear stakeholder interest that we've heard and seen in learning more about strategies to support V1G development in grid-constrained areas. And then moving on to this third example here, and as we've mentioned a few times, the original proposal was from the Coniston perspective only. So we only included a downstate make-ready program flowchart. In the modified proposal, we now have a downstate and upstate make-ready program flowchart. And together, collectively in this appendix, this really creates this high-level resource for participants who are interested in projects across the JU. And we'll take a couple minutes after we go through this last example to show what those flowcharts look like. And then this last example would be the appendix that has been added to summarize comments from stakeholders. And this really just creates that record of what were key comments that were made during that initial comment period. So I'll pause here before switching to the flowchart document.
Grace, I think we have a question from Cole.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Grace, can you just say a little bit more about the second row there, what it means, like what is in the modified proposal? What do you mean by supporting participants looking to implement those solutions? What does that support entail?
Yes, thank you, Cole. So in the modified proposal, we mention about how participants can work with advisory services to consider these solutions. And this is definitely something that we'll continue to think about with the LMTIP program that was just released as well, to make sure that the language is aligned. So I would say that it's a first draft, but heavy emphasis on advisory services.
Okay, so the advisory services and kind of making customers aware of incentive programs like LMTIP or what there is out there. It isn't something that's like part of the interconnection process, though. Like there's not like a new step that's like look at if any of these solutions is applicable.
No, it'd be more about pre-engagement and thinking through what's the right setup for a project versus adding additional step to the application process.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, Zach, I'm seeing your comment in the chat here about providing clarity on the unidirectional or V1G definition. That is a good flag. We will make sure that we clearly define what we mean by V1G in the modified proposal. But we're really trying to align it with the scope of the EVWIG. So really focusing on unidirectional charging and less on anything that would have to actually go through the SIR process or anything that's looking to integrate DER specifically.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the further consideration on that. And the risk here, just want to avoid any inadvertent sort of unintended consequences from using this definition. You could think of like a school bus site that wants to do V2G. So it's going to deploy the vehicles and the chargers and all the equipment. And then that SIR process might take a while. And in the meantime, having all your equipment on site functional but not actually being able to use it to get kids to school while you move through the SIR, which might take a while. That would be a pretty bad outcome. So just want to be careful and make sure that we can, yeah, the capability versus the, you know, really actual operational setup. Thanks.
Great. Okay, I'm going to switch my screen share quickly to the program flowchart. And this really, we wanted to just revisit these as, or just highlight that they will be in the modified proposal. This looks similar, it should be really similar content to what was originally filed in the straw proposal by Con Edison. But you know, you can see here that for the Make Ready program flow, for the downstate process, as we mentioned before, there's an incentive eligibility review process that happens ahead of a customer going through the service determination review process. You can see the additional documents that are required on the customer side ahead of going through that process. And this all leads into the Make Ready incentive, the initial calculation for that, once they have the service determination ruling in place. And then once that initial incentive calculation has been made, that's really when the construction kicks off. And yeah, you can see the customer dependency around customer side construction, the utility side constructions. That's same as it would be for any general new service request project. And then going into the final couple steps here that are a little bit more Make Ready specific. So we have the work verification that, you know, there are some specific Make Ready checklist items there, and then the final incentive processing and payment, and then the closeout and reporting for the Make Ready program as well. And we've also included in the appendix, as I mentioned before, the upstate Make Ready program flow, which, you know, should look fairly similar to the downstate, with the difference in that initial part of the process and the addition of kayak calculation. But I'll pause here to see if Josh, if you have anything that you'd like to add specifically.
Nothing particular. This is similar to what we shared in the presentation, but just walks through sort of the upstate process.
Great. So yeah, you can see the similar kind of closeout and reporting and incentive payment processes as well. So yeah, that was really the content that we wanted to review for today. Again, can pause and see if there are any additional questions.
Thanks, Grace. That was very helpful. Lastly, we just wanted to go over a couple of things. Zach, can you move forward in the slides? We have an upcoming meeting scheduled for December 11th. We'll be reviewing the final draft of the straw proposal, or at least I should say draft of straw proposal. And again, no meetings have been scheduled right now after that, but that doesn't mean that they won't be. Last meeting, I just wanted to correct an error that I misspoke on flexible interconnection. Any flexible interconnection that requires the SIR process will be addressed in the interconnection technical working group. For anything, you know, bidirectional, but anything with load, the flexible interconnection will be not included in this working group right now because it's outside of the scope assigned to the EVIWIG by the commission in the midpoint order. addressing the flexible interconnection and other technologies related to the load should be discussed in any comments to the draft straw proposal once the draft straw proposal gets submitted to DMM. It'll be SAPA'd and comments can be provided to that. Next slide, Zach. So for the next steps for the EVIWIG group, we will, the EVIWIG can determine when the draft proposal is final and it will be posted to DMM. And then the draft proposal will be subject to notice and comment period through on the DMM site. And then comments will be accepted for 60 days once it gets SAPA'd. And that's all I have for now. Oh, wait, maybe. Oh, yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Lisa, can I just ask on that last slide, what does it mean by once the EVIWIG determines the draft proposal is final? Is there like, is it a plan to survey folks who have been participating? Is that a decision for the JU and staff based on stakeholder feedback? Just do you have an idea of what that means?
The latter. So I'm assuming that we'll get comments. Again, what we were talking about earlier is possibly putting it on the EVIWIG webpage. It's going to be placed on DMM for everyone to read, and we'll get, comments. We'll probably have to, if there's a lot of comments, or I'm getting a lot of emails where people want to discuss a certain section or something, I'm sure other meetings are going to have to be scheduled. So yeah, with stakeholder feedback, we'll incorporate all of it into the document as best as we can. And
got it. So just to clarify on that, you said it will go on DMM. I thought you had said that the updated straw proposal will go on the EVIWIG website, but not DMM. It will only show up on DMM once it is like going to be SAPA'd for formal comment. Is that right?
well, I want it on for the formal comment. It has to be on DMM. I'm thinking that, but I have to run this by everyone here, but I'm thinking that we could put the draft on the EVIWIG website, but the comments wouldn't be public then. In other words, any comments would have to come through DMM during the SAPA period. So it would just be up for people to look at and see what it is.
Right. Yeah. Just what I'm getting at is there some avenue for stakeholders to share feedback on the updated proposal before that formal SAPA process? Because obviously we haven't had a chance to see like the written down updates yet, and I recognize that staff is going to be editing it as well. So is there any step between now and the SAPA process for stakeholders to see the updates and share any thoughts before the final draft comes out for formal comment?
Yeah, I think that I think we can put it on the EVIWIG website, and I'm trying to think what's the best way to communicate. It would be, I guess I have to think about it, because if we want everything communicated to everyone, or just to staff, or I think we can put it up on the EVIWIG website, and we'll figure out a way. Maybe I'll get emails, and we can figure out how things can get incorporated in between staff and the JU.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Lisa, this is Katie from Grace's computer.
Hi, Katie from Grace's computer.
Just to Cole's point, like when comments come through in the SAPA process, there's still a mechanism where like we could respond to those comments as well, right?
Yeah, because it wouldn't be finalized through DMM anyways, because we would have to we would have to, I guess we have to summarize those comments. Stephanie, help me out here because all of a sudden I can't remember. So if we SAP it in DMM and we get comments, we would have to summarize the comments, but it would still go to the commission prior to incorporating those comments into the document itself. And I think what Cole is saying is he wanted any maybe suggestions or edits in the document prior to DMM and being sent to the commission. Is that what you're saying? Was that Cole that was just asking that question?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it would be useful to have some opportunity for, folks who have been participating in the working group to share more of that informal feedback on the updated proposal, which we helpfully got a summary of today, but haven't seen like the full thing yet. So just, in the spirit of this being a working group, I think it would be useful to have that chance. And then obviously folks will have the chance for formal comment afterwards, and it can go to the commission then. But before that whole process gets kicked off, some opportunity for folks just to weigh in may be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. I can't commit to a date when it'll go up to on the EviWig site then prior to that, but I do have most everybody's here email. I had made a EviWig email list, and I can once it goes up there prior to being placed on DMM, I can send something out to let everyone know.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That sounds good. We can work with you on however we can support.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it right now, so I don't really, I guess nothing's finalized, but I don't see a problem with putting it up on DMM and getting comments. I don't know the best way to get the comments yet, but I'll figure it out. Probably tonight when I can't sleep.
Looks like we have one hand raised, Lisa.
Oh, we have, oh, it's Mari. Hi, Mari.
Hi. Just in terms of the formal process, it looks like from that slide, you're just thinking of this as one comment period, not, a comment and then a reply period. Is that right?
That's correct. That's what I was thinking about. But it sounds like if we put it up on the EviWig website, there'll be more than one comment period. It's just those won't be formal comments.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, sometimes it helps to have that second reply comment period, because then you can reply to comments that have been made, and then they both go into the record for, commission review. So I would encourage thinking through it like that. Not that I want to elongate the process, but I know that's a long comment period for just one set of comments. So we could think about breaking it up.
Okay, that's one. Yep, we can think about that. I'll bring this all back and we'll discuss this internally we'll figure out how we're going to make this a process that's going to make everyone happy. Does anybody have any other questions? So it sounds like I'm going to, we haven't, our next meeting for December 11th. I'm going to bring all this back. We'll discuss the best way to get comments back and forth with everyone and incorporating them into a document. So I will take that back. I'll probably try to get that answer before the next meeting. All right. If there's no other questions, I think we can conclude. Again, you can always contact me through my email, there's a EVSE website or email as well. And all these notes, presentations today, and the recording will go up onto the EviWig website as well. So Thanks, everyone.